Hello and welcome to another Dungeons & Dragons session dramatization set in the world of Alter Aeon. Our protagonists are Kara the War Mage, Morden the Hexblade, Tess the Sorceress, and Sienna the Rogue. I am Shadowfax, the Dungeon Master. Session 12, Ghost of a Chance. In this session, we are changing the lineup of players. My sister's oldest son will be joining our group, and his character will be replacing Sened. Sened is going to be retired to NPC status, so I will not be playing a PC anymore. My nephew will be playing as a kobold, whose name translates to Sienna Stone in common. His character is a level 4 rogue, level 3 spell thief. Sienna specifically is a copper dragonrot kobold, so his scales are a coppery color instead of one of the typical kobold hues. His backstory goes as follows. Sienna was hatched a little over 6 years ago, born into a kobold tribe that lived in the Ash Mountains. While he was still a wormling, his tribe was growing numerous, so, as kobolds are wont to do, they decided to split up. Sienna's clan was relocated with the new tribe. After enjoying some prosperity for a time, disaster visited the fledgling tribe. They were ransacked by a rival tribe of orcs. Sienna survived the attack, but his kindred did not. He even returned to the home of his original tribe to discover that they had packed up and left, and had not left any indication where they had gone. Sienna wandered the wilderness by himself for a time, until he was captured by slavers. Unbeknown to Sienna, he was smuggled onto the island of Slowy. There, he was forced to work in a mine with other kobold slaves. He managed to escape captivity during a slave uprising, and he and the other escaped slaves scattered to avoid recapture. Sienna has barely reached adulthood, and has spent quite some time on his own. As such, he still retains a childlike naivete. A few days prior to this session, Sienna crossed over the River Tuy, using the haunted bridge, although no spirit came out to bother him. He found the village of Pelham overrun with turbanas, so he kept his distance. Soon thereafter, he saw our heroes roll into town and begin slaying turbanas with reckless abandon, which piqued his interest. Sienna has been stalking our heroes ever since, but has not yet met them or interacted with any of the villagers. When Morden arose in the morning, he found Sened already awake, seated and meditating, as he often did early in the morning. This time, however, Sened was staring at a glass bottle filled with a clear liquid on a table, instead of sitting with his eyes closed. He watched the priest for a little bit, and asked if he was okay. Sened seemed to snap out of his trance, turned to Morden, and said, "I am fine. I have been praying and meditating like the keeper of the reliquary had suggested that I do." Sened further explained that even though the villagers who survived the Turbana attack had had their physical wounds healed, he felt that their emotional wounds would take more time to heal. Even though Sened expressed that counseling really wasn't his field of expertise, it was his opinion that the villagers of Pelham could use all the help they could get, and that he wanted to stay a while longer. Morden replied that he figured that would likely be the case, and since they were not obligated to any contract at the moment, Sened was free to do as he wished. Sened promised to return to the Vimarkan Mercenary Guild when the village was doing better. Kara knocked on the door. She was the first one up and had already woken Tess and Fernando up. They found some hardtack and water for breakfast, and then all went outside, passing through the repaired front gate of the fort. Sened gave the others a heartfelt goodbye, and gave the bottle he was using as a meditation focus to Morden. When Morden took hold of it, he noticed that the liquid therein remained perfectly still, without a single ripple across its surface. Sened told him that it was axiomatic water. Morden asked if it would be effective against the bridge haunt they were about to face, and Sinet answered that it probably would, if that's what he wanted to do with it. The favored soul then searched his bag, checked his pockets, and then searched his bag again, and then a third time. He said that he was going to return his key to the guild hall, but he didn't appear to have it anymore. Morden groaned that he would likely have to replace the lock now, and Sinet apologized. Sienna was hiding in the forest, watching the entrance of the fort. He had seen the party enter the night before, so he was waiting for them to come out, and, sure enough, the four came out early in the morning, as he expected. The human male wearing the yellow robe he had seen casting healing spells shook hands with the others and went west, while the armored male, his creepy black dog, and the two females headed east, using the forest path on their way to the bridge. Sienna followed the three, moving stealthily so as not to be seen, once again traveling through the forest between Pelham and the river, Tuy. Our heroes had to walk single file down the narrow dirt road, with Morden taking the lead. The sky was bright and sunny, although much of the sunlight was blocked by the thick canopy of the forest. The journey to the bridge took about 5 hours. At one point, Kara and Fernando heard something rustling in the forest. The party stopped and looked around, but saw nothing. Sienna had made the noise, but was too well hidden for the others to find. Around noon, they approached the bridge area. Sure enough, the ghost was on the bridge, appearing to be a Zulian boy dressed in a burlap smock and carrying a fishing rod. On the way there, Tess had made Kara promise not to try and burn down the bridge again, and let her talk to it. The others had agreed, so Tess approached the little boy as he skipped up to the party. There was a strip of land between the edge of the forest and the bank of the river that was bare sand, so Sienna hung back in the trees to watch what would unfold. Although he hadn't spoken the language in quite some time, Sienna knew Common, so he could understand everyone. The boy excitedly bantered with Tess. Tess had been planning out this moment, and knew how she wanted to steer the conversation. So after exchanging greetings, she asked the boy if his parents knew where he was. He said that he did not, but that it was okay, since they pretty much let him do whatever he wanted. Although the ghost was cheerful and friendly, Kara interjected a quick question to make sure of something that was bothering her, asking the ghost if he knew who they were. The boy replied no, because he would definitely remember a girl as pretty as her. Kara chuckled politely. Tess was ready to take over the conversation again when something unexpected happened. The boy then pointed to the forest, straight at Sienna, and asked if the kobold was with them. Kara, Morden, and Tess spun around to see. The boy called out to Sienna and told him to come out. Sienna then felt really weird. He stood up and stepped out into the open, walking right up to the others. He didn't want to, but somehow his body just acted without his permission. The strange sensation soon faded, and Sienna cleared his throat and awkwardly said hello. The copper-scaled kobold wore a chain shirt that was clearly a size too big for him and had a sword strapped to his back. Kara, Morden, Tess, and the boy all warmly greeted Sienna. It did make him feel a bit less threatened, but he was still very anxious to be surrounded by strangers, 3 of whom towered over him. The boy then invited all of them onto the bridge to go fishing, and Tess picked up where she had left off, pursuing her premeditated route of examination. Tess replied that the bridge wasn't a good fishing spot, and, as a matter of fact, there weren't any fish there at all. She said that they were afraid to go near the bridge, and asked him to confirm if that was true. With that, something seemed to click inside of the ghost, because his smile immediately evaporated. Kara, Morden, and Tess closely watched the ghost for any sign of aggression, but he continued to parley with Tess, albeit in a much more serious tone. At first, Tess tried to secure permission to use the bridge, but the ghost responded that he would be compelled to attack them if they tried to cross. She asked him how he died, and he replied that he fell into the river. While Tess pursued her paranormal investigation, Sienna still really wanted to slink away back into the forest unnoticed. He slowly backed up, while Tess and the ghost were talking, but Kara stepped between him and the trees and spoke with him some more, asking him how long he had been following them and why. Sienna answered honestly, saying that he had seen them killing the monsters in the village, and that she and her friends seemed really good at killing things. He was impressed by what he had seen, and said that he wanted to learn to fight like that. Kara explained to him what they were doing with the ghost, and told him to stand by, because if things between her friend and the bridge haunt didn't go well, they might have a fight on their hands right then and there. The concept of battling a ghost intrigued Sienna, and Kara's easygoing nature put his mind at rest, so he stuck around to see how things would play out. Meanwhile, Tess had gotten all the information out of the ghost that she felt she could. She reached a dead end in her questioning because the ghost didn't have any concept of the passage of time, but she did learn that his last memory was of being crushed in the water after falling off the bridge, and not of drowning. Tessa's last question was to ask the ghost where he was from, and he said that he was from Marghera. Convinced that they could lay the spirit to rest by discovering what was binding it to the material world, they decided to head back to Pelham to search for clues. Kara, Morden, Tess, and Sienna bid the ghost farewell and left the way they came. While traveling, Morden asked Sienna if he was looking for mercenary work. Morden described it as doing tasks that no one else wanted to do, but Sienna didn't seem to grasp the concept. Kara then said that being a mercenary basically meant killing people for money, which Sienna not only understood, but also seemed to approve of. Morden told him to stick with the group and he'd get some real combat experience. Also during the trip, Sienna strung a few gems that he'd been carrying around together and made a necklace, which he gave to Tess. The sun was setting when they returned to Pelham, and our heroes caught Sened on his way out of the fort. They asked him if he had learned anything more about the bridge ghost, and Sened directed them inside to talk to Pilkim. They found the cleric in the shrine. Pilkim was intrigued by their quest, but he didn't know any specific information about the ghost. He had turned it many times before in order to cross the bridge, and he did confirm their theory that it might be possible to release the spirit from the bridge. He said that ghosts sometimes had unfinished business that kept them bound in such a fashion. Our heroes left the fort and talked about what to do next. Sienna talked to Sened, asking him about what kind of healing spells he could cast. He went about it in a roundabout way, but Sienna was finally able to explain that he wanted a healing spell to take using his spell thief ability. Sened said that he didn't have many spells left since the day was nearly over, but he did let Sienna take a lesser vigor spell. With Sened in tow, our heroes scoured the village to gather information. Their first lead was Miasotis, the village's wise woman whom they had first met in Barquisimeto. She was able to provide a name for the boy, Linaro. The wise woman informed them that she had once tried to speak with the bridge haunt, but the encounter ended with Linaro attacking her and her rat familiar. She said that Linaro's parents had died in the Turbana invasion, and that his siblings had moved away a long time ago. Our heroes then searched their house, but didn't find anything of note. They continued to query villagers. There weren't many elderly villagers left to talk to, but they did find another lead. There was a woman who said that her niece, who had been Linaro's age, once had confided in her that she did something terrible as a child, and that she never told anyone about. The niece's name, Maria. Her parents had passed away a long time ago, and Maria herself perished during the Turbana attack. Our heroes searched Maria's house and found a few books. They were primers for learning phonics in common. There were some messy notes scribbled in one of them that commented about Linaro, some positive and some negative. The group wondered what to do with the lead, and Sened suggested that they could ask Maria herself about it. Her body had likely been buried in the mass grave on the edge of town. Tess said that was a brilliant idea, and they returned to Fort Margera to ask Pilcum about it. The cleric said that he didn't have a speak with dead spell prepared, but he would pray for one the following morning. He suggested that they secure permission from Lady Pelham. They found her and explained the situation. She gave them consent on the condition that she be present when Maria's corpse was questioned. Sened and Saltash had moved into the bedrooms where our heroes had previously stayed, so the quartet went back to Maria's hut and slept there. They eagerly sought out Emery Elizabeth and Pilcum early in the morning, and were guided to the mass grave, where villagers slain in the Turbana attack had been buried. Kara took her shovel, Sienna got out his pick, and they went about their grisly work. After about an hour of carefully digging, they managed to find the corpse of Maria. Pilcum cast the Speak with Dead spell, and Tess proceeded with her plan to discover the truth. With the right questions, the story of what had happened to Linaro was sewn together by Maria's monotone answers within the few precious minutes they had before the spell wore off. It had been 18 years ago. Although it took all morning to get there, Linaro had gone fishing on the bridge crossing the Tuy River. He hadn't wanted her to come, but Maria had followed him anyway. They argued while he sat on the bridge's railing and tried to fish. On a childish whim, Maria stole a kiss. Linaro punched her, and Maria thoughtlessly retaliated by shoving him as hard as she could. He fell off of the north side of the bridge, and he was immediately swallowed by a giant yellow constrictor snake that had been lurking under the bridge. Lady Pelham communicated the final question, and asked Maria if she had told anyone what had happened. Maria answered no. With that, the body's jaw went slack as the spell animating it ended. While Emery Elizabeth looked on thoughtfully, Pilcum asked the group if they wanted him to accompany them during their next visit with Linaro's ghost. Morden politely declined, stating that they had defeated the ghost through force of arms before, and that they could do it again if necessary. Tess expressed hope that they wouldn't have to. After grabbing a bite to eat, the party left for the bridge. It was sunny and warm, and their journey was uneventful. The four discussed what to do about Linaro and came to the conclusion that they would have to find and kill the snake that had killed him. Morta did point out that it might not be that straightforward, since the snake that had eaten Linaro might not even be in the area or even alive anymore. He told the others that it was time they returned to Vimarken, so if they couldn't solve the ghost's dilemma during this trip, they would have to destroy or circumvent it. Everyone else agreed. They reached the bridge before midday and found Linaro waiting for them. The ghost remembered them and didn't try the previous routine of pretending to be alive or concealing the bridge with an illusion. Tess told Linaro what they had learned from Maria. Upon hearing that he had been eaten by a constrictor snake, Linaro turned away and started pacing, muttering to himself. Tess asked him if they could search under the bridge for his bones, but Linaro angrily retorted that even if his remains were still there, he would be compelled to attack them. After being prompted, Linaro further explained that trying to cross the river within 1,000 feet of the bridge would also result in him attacking them. Morden asked if there were any giant constrictor snakes living nearby, and Linaro said that there was a nest of them north of the bridge. They were living in a dire muskrat's den. Deciding that confronting the snakes was the best course of action, our heroes walked along the west bank of the river until they saw an enormous mound of sticks, rushes, and mud in the shallows of the opposite side of the river. They observed the mound for a short while, but didn't see anything. Morden started to forge the river, but Linaro appeared and told him to go back. Morden inquired of Linaro how much farther his influence went, and the ghost groaned indignantly. Tess sweetly reiterated Morden's question, and the ghost relented and showed them the northern boundary of his influence. Fortunately, the party was able to walk about a half-mile beyond that point and find an abandoned beaver dam to cross the river. They returned to the muskrat den, but kept their distance. Morden directed his dark companion to stand on top of the den, and the head of a giant yellow snake poked out of the den to look at it before retreating back inside. Since it wasn't in any danger, Morden had his dark companion stay where it was. Sienna asked for an offensive spell from Kara, and she let him take a shocking grass spell. Morden cast an enhancement spell on his Falchion. Kara then let loose a flaming spear, which set the den on fire. 3 giant constrictor snakes burst out of the Holocaust, and the battle began. Sienna dashed forward toward the closest snake with his claws full of crackling blue electricity. He dodged a clumsy bite from his red-scaled foe and pressed his palms against its body, blasting it with electric energy. The snake's skeleton was visible for an instant as its body trembled uncontrollably, and sizzling blisters were left on its scales where the kobold had touched it. Sienna danced back onto the riverbank to avoid being harmed by the flames. Tess used a magic missile spell against the orange-colored snake. The sorceress was now well practiced enough to eke out 4 missiles with a single casting, and the invisible projectiles of force battered and bruised her serpentine opponent. Morden joined Sienna near the mound and slashed at the yellow snake his dark companion had earlier flushed out. His first swing connected with his foe, cutting a deep gash down the length of its body. Morden swung a second time, but the snake had quickly drawn back from the pain of his first strike, so he only hit empty air. Kara readied another spell, hoping to make use of one of her more powerful spells like Lightning Bolt, but then something happened to make her change her mind. The 2 snakes engaged with Morden and Sienna bit them and wrapped their bodies around them. Morden's limbs could be seen sticking out between the coils of the giant yellow snake, ineffectually slapping the snake with the flat of his falchion. Poor little Sienna, however, was completely engulfed by the bulk of the red constrictor snake, who was without a doubt squeezing the life out of him. Turning to Tess, Kara said, "I'll get Sienna, you get Morden." Tess nodded in agreement, and Kara fired a bluish-white orb of acid that splashed all over the red snake. Tess used Magic Missile again, this time targeting the yellow snake. As the red and yellow snakes continued to constrict their victims, the orange snake advanced on the sorceress and war mage, and the girls started backpedaling. Sienna couldn't move a muscle. He couldn't even open his jaws to bite. The constrictor snake squeezed harder, and Sienna found it more and more difficult to breathe. He was getting lightheaded. He wondered if his first job as a mercenary would be his last. All he could do was hope that his allies would rescue him. Morden couldn't see his friends, but he definitely felt the snake rock to one side as it was hit by Tessa's magic missile spell. His opponent loosened its grip for a split second. He took advantage of the moment, cramming his falchion between the 2 lowest coils of the snake. Twisting the blade downward, he wiggled one foot up and behind the blade. Morden then pushed down with all of his might, slicing the tail end of the snake clean off. What was left of the snake continued to desperately cling to Morden, so he wasn't safe yet. Kara cast Acid Orb at the red constrictor snake again before the orange snake could chase her out of range. Her gambit paid off. Between the damage the snake had suffered from Sienna's initial attack and Kara's subsequent acid orbs, the snake's nervous system overloaded with pain and shut down. It went limp and collapsed around a very grateful but barely conscious Sienna, who crawled away from the serpentine heap as quickly as possible. On Kara's command, Tess backed away from Kara so the orange snake would have to choose to follow either one or the other. It continued to advance on Kara, so Tess took the opportunity to cast Magic Missile at the yellow constrictor snake again. The magic missiles rattled the snake, and, with his opponent weakened, Morden burst free, throwing the snake off of him. With precision aim, Morden lopped off the snake's head and impaled the severed cranium with his sword before it hit the ground. Meanwhile, the orange constrictor snake lurched forward to bite. With a well-timed swipe, Kara slapped its face away with her shield. She tried to follow up with a blow from her Morning Star, but missed. The snake turned around to prepare to strike again, but another magic missile spell from Tess threw off its aim and knocked it silly. Kara melted its face off with another acid orb, putting it down for good. Tess rushed up to Morden to check on him, while Kara ran up to Sienna to help him to his feet. Morden drank a cure potion, but after getting a look at Sienna's broken and bruised form, he admitted that the kobold looked to be in worse shape and wished that he had saved it for him. He asked Sienna if he could walk, and Sienna said that he was still catching his breath, but he should be able to walk. The four cut the snakes' bellies open to see if they had swallowed anything interesting, but all they found were some old fishing hooks. They then traveled south back to the bridge. The bridge looked as it should, and there was no sign of Linaro. Morden climbed onto the bridge and crossed halfway. Nothing happened. He crossed the bridge to the other side and returned to the eastern bank of the river. There was no reaction. Linaro was simply gone. Tess was satisfied that they had been successful. It was mid-afternoon when they left for Vimarken. Tess asked Morden why he had consented to slay the Yonkhegs and put the bridge haunt to rest, even though there was no monetary reward. It didn't seem very mercenary of him. Morden responded that not every reward earned had to be measured with money. For example, he explained that once they had reported having laid to rest a spirit that had been haunting the island for nearly 20 years, he figured that they would still have been paid, just with increased fame and reputation instead of money. Besides, he further reasoned that it seemed to make her happy, and that made it worth it. She gave him a peck on the cheek and said that he was sweet. Soon thereafter, Fernando spotted something ahead in the forest and let his mistress know. The party halted and saw a thorn beast crossing the path ahead of them from south to north. They hunkered down and stayed quiet, letting the monster pass. A second thorn beast they hadn't previously seen followed after the first. Since they didn't seem to notice our heroes, they continued on their way to Vimarken once they were sure that the thorn beasts were gone. When it was getting dark, our heroes were still about an hour away from Vimarken when they encountered a large, tall figure walking toward them on the path. The mysterious traveler called out a greeting in Giant, and Kara responded in kind. Once they were a little closer, the party could see that it was a male ogre wearing hide armor, carrying a huge club and sack. The ogre waltzed right up to Morden and looked the group over. Perhaps figuring them for an easy mark, he replied in Giant that they didn't look so tough, and grabbed his great club from his bag. Before the party could react, the ogre screamed a battle cry and rushed at Morden, bashing an already injured hexblade on the shoulder. Morden felt his entire body rattle under the impact and briefly wondered how many of his bones had been shattered from the blow. Tess stepped sideways off of the path to get a clear shot at the assailant and blasted him with a quartet of magic missiles. Kara stepped off the path the opposite way and cast Kelmor's firebolt, showering the ogre with red-hot ashes. While the girls fired off their spells, Sienna drew his sword and slipped into the forest. He was still badly hurt from his fight with the giant constrictor snake, but he decided to be brave. Morden hexed the ogre and made a retributive attack, slashing at his opponent with his falchion, and scored an especially good hit. From the shadows, Sienna analyzed his foe while he flinched from Morden's attack, noting a gap in his armor under the armpit. Sienna made a sneak attack from the ogre's flank, springing up to stab a deep wound and retreating back into the underbrush before the ogre could retaliate. Fortunately for Sienna, the ogre was far too busy with the enemies in front of him to notice the tiny one by his side. The ogre made another couple swings at Morden, but the club instead came crashing down on the ground beside the Hexblade. Tess blasted the ogre with another magic missile spell. Kara had circled around opposite of Sienna and angled a lightning bolt spell so as not to catch Morden or Sienna in it. The ogre weathered the spells, but his body involuntarily twisted and turned under their impacts. Sienna then stabbed the weakened ogre again, bringing the giant down. They then looted the corpse, finding a ring of protection in the ogre's possession in addition to the club and armor, which were also magical. It was completely dark when they reached Vamarken, and the western gate had been shut for the night. They rung the bell to alert the guards inside, and one of them opened the gate and let them in. They passed by the blacksmith shop and saw Rodnar out working the forge, so they stopped to talk to him. He asked them how their trip went, and they explained to him everything that had happened, from burying Pilar's body to saving Pelham from Turbanas, to solving the mystery of the Tuy River Bridge haunting. The dwarven blacksmith listened in earnest. Once they had finished regaling him with their stories, he asked them to come and share them with the other town councilors, and they agreed. They were having a meeting tomorrow evening. Rodnar told the party that Char was back in town and waiting for them at the guild hall. When Morden asked him how she got inside without a key, he admitted that he didn't know. They then sold the ogre's equipment to him. Sienna also left his armor with Rodnar to have it enchanted and resized. When they arrived at the guild hall, they could see light coming out through the window. Morden tried the door, and it was unlocked. He sighed, and they all went inside. They found Holly, the tavern girl, in the foyer, sitting across from a blonde female elf clad in leafy green armor, who had her feet propped up and her cap pulled over her face. Holly leapt to her feet and joyfully greeted our heroes, running up to Kara to hug her. Morden asked Holly how she got into the guild hall, and Holly produced a key, stating that she had taken it out of the priest's bag. When she had overheard our heroes discussing how they were going to leave town to bury Pilar's body, she took it to make sure she could get in the guild hall while they were away. Tess chided her and told her it was wrong to steal, and she gave the key to Morden. Sienna asked who the elf was, and Holly said her name was Char. Kara said that she looked like she was asleep, but Morden corrected her, stating that elves did not need to sleep, and that she was probably trancing. The elf emerged from her trance at this point and stood, disturbed by the sound of their voices. She confirmed her identity as Char Featherstep, and made it very clear to our heroes that she was not happy. Morden and his group had left town without so much as leaving a note, and because Morden had changed the locks, she had to rely on Holly letting her into the guild hall. She pointed at 2 parchments on the table and stated that they had 2 potential contracts, and also revealed that Gronk had been by the guild hall 2 days prior to drop off his cut to the mercenary guild. She further elaborated that Gronk was quite upset to learn that Gilbert was dead, as he had been quite fond of the former guildmaster. He had waited around for a day, but had to return to his duties in Indira. Morden apologized for leaving her out of the loop, and asked what she had been doing. Char told our heroes in no uncertain terms how she had been led on a wild goose chase through Gochalandia, searching for a witch that apparently didn't exist. It was now clear to her that the contract was fake, merely a ruse to lure her out of town while Gilbert executed his devious schemes. Morden examined the 2 potential contracts. In the first proposal, Charlista, widow of the late mayor of Vamarken, had reported that her husband's body was being transported to Naphtali to be raised, but the caravan was attacked and his body stolen. She wanted someone to recover it. The second proposal was from the Vamarken Town Council. Apparently they had received reports of a bandit wearing chains harassing travelers on the road between Stillwater and Vamarken. Kara, Morden, and Tess exchanged knowing looks, and agreed that they should probably follow up on that one. Char agreed to take the other contract. Morden asked her if she needed help, and while she did consider taking Sienna with her, Char ultimately decided that a tracking job would go quicker working by herself. She said if she needed any extra muscle, she'd swing back to Indira and pick up Grunk. With that, she left, saying that she had to stand outside of town where she usually stayed, because they didn't let her bear companion into town anymore, and that she'd be back in the morning. Our heroes had brought in a couple cots to accommodate everyone last time they were in the guild hall, so they offered Sined's cot to Sienna. Sienna declined, stating that he preferred to sleep on the floor. He did take a pillow, laid it down in the foyer in front of the fireplace, and lay on top of it. He heard the others saying goodnight to one another as he quickly drifted off to sleep. And that is where our session ended. Please like the video and subscribe to our channel to continue following the story of our heroes. Transcripts of our Dungeons & Dragons sessions are available at www.lawful-evil.org/DND. If you enjoyed this and don't already play the game this is based on, you can explore the world of Alter Aeon for yourself by visiting www.alteraeon.com. Remember, the family that plays together stays together. Thanks for listening, and happy mudding, everybody.
Alteraeon.com. That's ALTERAEON.com.